I've driven quiet mountain roads my whole life, but nothing ever shook me like that night in the Appalachian Mountains. It was early October, the fog thick as smoke, swallowing everything. My headlights barely cut through the mist as the road twisted deeper into the dark. I was headed to a friend's cabin in Dry Hollow, a town so small GPS barely found it. My signal was gone. No wind, no crickets, just silence. Then I saw it. A figure stood by the road, perfectly still. At first I thought it was a hitchhiker, but as I got closer, my chest tightened. It was tall, disturbingly thin, its head tilted like its neck had snapped. Its face was pale, its eyes were nothing but black holes. I hit the brakes. My truck skidded on the damp asphalt. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, its twisted shape framed in my headlights. Then it took a step forward. The sound was sharp and wrong. Crack, crack, crack. Each movement made its limbs jerk like broken bones, snapping back into place. I slammed the gas and flew past it, the figure shrinking in the rearview mirror, still staring or maybe listening. The road dragged on longer than it should have. I'd driven this stretch once before, but now it felt endless. No signs, no cabins, just trees pressing in, their shapes warping through the fog. And then my truck sputtered. The gas gauge dropped to empty, though I'd filled up hours earlier. I coasted to a stop. That's when I saw the cabin. A faint orange glow flickered through the trees, maybe 100 yards away. Against all better judgment, I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward it. The forest was dead silent, every step crunching beneath my boots. The cabin looked ancient, wood rotting, chimney crooked. On the door, something was carved deep into the wood. Turn back. I should have, but I pushed the door open. Inside, the air smelled like damp earth and rust. An oil lamp burned weakly on a table. The walls were covered in charcoal drawings, dozens of them. Every picture showed the same figure. Tall, tilted head, black eyes. In each drawing, it stood closer to the cabin. Then I heard it again. Crack, crack, crack. The sound was outside, moving closer through the trees. My flashlight flickered. The light went out. Footsteps creaked on the porch, slow, dragging. I bolted through the back door and sprinted into the forest. Branches whipped my arms. I could hear it gliding behind me. The sound, no longer footsteps, but something wet and heavy moving across the ground. I fell hard, my flashlight rolling ahead. When I grabbed it and shone the beam forward, my breath caught. It was inches from me. Its mouth hung open too wide, skin stretched tight, black eyes fixed on mine. It tilted its head again. Crack. Then, everything went black. I woke at dawn, lying beside my truck. The tank was full again. The engine started without a problem. When I looked toward the woods, the cabin was gone. Before I drove off, I noticed something carved into the dirt on my bumper. 5 long finger marks, and beneath them, one word. Stay. I've never returned to those mountains. But sometimes, when the road is empty and the night is too quiet, I swear I can still hear it in the distance. It was one of those nights where the air feels thicker than it should, like the dark itself has weight. I remember every detail. 2007, a humid summer night in a quiet holler deep in southern West Virginia. My boyfriend was drunk off his ass, his friends had all gone home, and I was the designated driver, stone cold sober. His parents were out of town for the weekend, so we had the house to ourselves. It was a simple old place at the bottom of a mountain, one of those houses that sits low and quiet, with a fenced-in yard climbing halfway up the hillside. Out here, the forest presses in close, like it's listening. After getting him into bed, I stepped outside to the back porch for a cigarette. I didn't bother turning the light on. If you've ever been out in Appalachia after sundown, you know when the lights are off, it's black, not just dark. It's a kind of black that swallows every outline, where the only sounds are the whispers of the woods and the pulse of your own heartbeat. I sat down on the porch swing and lit my cigarette. The first inhale was sharp and familiar. I could hear crickets, a distant whip-poor will, and the occasional rustle from something small in the underbrush. All ordinary sounds for this place. Then it happened. A scream. Not human, but so close to human, it made my blood run cold. It was a piercing, blood-curdling shriek that sounded like a woman being murdered just 100 feet away from me. It cut through the quiet like a blade, echoing through the holler. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. My cigarette fell from my fingers, hitting the porch with a soft hiss. I didn't wait to analyze it. I jumped to my feet, heart hammering against my ribs, and bolted inside, slamming the door behind me. For a second, I just stood there in the dark living room, my breathing loud and uneven. Logic kicked in. Coyotes, maybe. Bobcats, sometimes. People said they could scream like a woman. I tried to convince myself of that, but the sound hadn't been far away. It had been right there. I flipped on the porch, and floodlights. That's when I saw it. At first, my brain didn't quite register what I was looking at. A massive shadow moved back and forth inside the fenced yard. Then the shape sharpened under the harsh floodlight. It was a cat, but not the kind that belonged here. This thing was sleek and jet black, its muscles rippling under its coat, tail low and long. Its eyes reflected the light like two golden coins. A black panther. It was pacing fast, back and forth along the fence line, letting out those same inhuman screams that had sent me running inside. The sound didn't seem to come from its throat. It tore out of it, raw and violent. It looked agitated, like it didn't know how to get out. I stood there, frozen, watching through the kitchen window. I swear it felt like an eternity. It would stop and turn its head toward the house every so often, locking those glowing eyes in my direction. I couldn't breathe. It was like staring at something that wasn't supposed to exist. People around here talk about strange things in the mountains. Ghost lights, screaming women that aren't women, big cats that officially don't exist anymore. Black panthers aren't supposed to be in West Virginia. But there it was, flesh and blood, trapped in the fence line, thrashing and shrieking. It clawed at the fence once, then turned and bounded toward the far side. I heard the creak of metal, then a heavy thud as it leapt over like it was nothing. I rushed to the window facing the hillside and watched its black shape vanish into the woods. The night swallowed it up like it had never been there. The forest went dead quiet. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, every light in the house blazing, listening to the silence. My boyfriend was passed out upstairs, oblivious. If I hadn't turned on the light, maybe it would have stayed in that yard longer. Maybe it would have come closer. The next morning, when the sun rose and the birds started their songs again, I went out back. The fence had fresh claw marks, deep gouges that hadn't been there before. There were tracks in the dirt, too huge, feline, unmistakable. I called the DNR that afternoon. The man on the phone chuckled like I was a drunk old lady spinning tales. "Ma'am," he said, "there ain't no Black Panthers in West Virginia." I told him I saw it with my own eyes. He sighed and said it was probably a bobcat or a dog, but bobcats don't weigh over 100 pounds, and they sure as hell don't have tails like that. I told a few other people friends, my brother, an old neighbor. Most didn't believe me either. One friend said it was probably a panther scream, meaning some weird fox or bobcat noise. Another said maybe it was a bear. But one older man who lived farther up the holler didn't laugh. He just nodded slow, like he'd been expecting me to say something like that eventually. "They come down sometimes," he told me. "When it gets too quiet in the woods, when they're hungry." I asked him what he meant by they. He just gave me a long, tired look and said, "Best not to go outside alone after dark." That sentence stuck with me more than the scream. Years have passed since that night, but I can still see it clearly. That thing, prowling inside the fence, like a ghost in the floodlight. The way it screamed sounded like something dying, or something pretending to be human. And the worst part? It wasn't fear of some folklore creature that kept me up for weeks after. It was the cold, certain knowledge that something that shouldn't be here was. That it saw me. That it screamed just to be heard. People say the Appalachian Mountains are quiet at night. That's not true. The mountains listen. They hold things. Sometimes, if you sit outside long enough with the lights off, those things answer back. I never sat out there alone again. Not after the night the mountain screamed back. 3 years ago, almost to the day, something happened to me deep in the Appalachian Mountains that I still can't explain. I was 28 strong, experienced, and at home in the wilderness. That afternoon, instead of taking my usual southern trail, I headed north into the wilder, steeper side of the range. About a mile out of town, I found something I'd never seen before. A buried concrete structure, half swallowed by earth and weeds. Low to the ground was a narrow opening just big enough to crawl through. Inside was a tiny chamber with a cement block in the center and a rusted metal bowl on top like some kind of crude altar. Cold air drifted out, sharp against the warm day. There were no mines or bunkers here. My gut told me to leave, but I snapped a few quick photos and kept hiking. I climbed until I found a rocky outcropping and sat down to rest, lighting a cigarette. The ridges above me glowed orange in the falling light. And then I saw them. 2 figures. They stood far off, maybe half a mile up the hill, motionless and silent. Even from that distance, I could feel their eyes on me. One turned to the other and pointed. My stomach dropped. The second one touched the first shoulder and pointed again straight at me. Then they began moving down the steep slope toward my position. Their movements were stiff but deliberate. I told myself it was just other hikers, but something about the way they moved made my skin prickle. When I looked away and then glanced back, they had stopped, just standing there, watching. I got up slowly, tried to play it cool, and started heading back toward the main trail, but when I reached a small basin and looked up again, they were already on the ridge ahead of me, closer now. One of them yelled something, but the words were garbled and sharp, echoing through the hills. Then came a long, shrill whistle that made my pulse spike. I changed course. The 5-mile walk back, along the usual route, suddenly didn't feel safe. I decided to cut through the rough terrain straight toward town. I knew the land well enough to navigate it, but each time I climbed another ridge, they were there. Always closer. Their voices drifted down through the dry evening air. "Hey, where you going?" One of them called in a sing-song voice that made my skin crawl. Another whistle followed, sharp and mocking. I could see them clearly now. 2 tall men with pale faces and clothes that looked wrong, like they belonged to another time. Their faces seemed too long, their movements precise and too fast for the uneven ground. I tried to lose them, descending a steep hill, weaving between trees and rocks. My breathing was quick and shallow, but when I looked up again, they had followed, always at the same unnerving distance. "Hey, come here," one shouted, voice high and sickly sweet. "We just want to talk." Their playful tone terrified me more than anything. They weren't lost, they weren't joking, they were hunting. The last ridge before town dropped into a short cliff, too steep to descend safely. I could hear them behind me now, footsteps crunching over loose stone. I yanked my phone from my pocket and called the first person I could think of. "Dad," I whispered, "I need you to come get me, right now." "What? Where are you?" "They're following me," I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. I turned, and there they were, maybe 20 yards away. One let out another whistle, this time slow, deliberate. "Dad, please hurry." I've never felt fear like that before. I'd hiked these mountains since childhood, but in that moment, they didn't feel like home. They felt like a trap. I sprinted down the hill, found a lower slope, and crashed through the brush until I reached the chain-link fence that marked the town's edge. I vaulted it and stumbled onto a paved trail. When I looked back, they were standing on the ridge, still watching. The moment they realized I saw them, they lowered their heads, as if hiding their faces. I ran through backyards until I saw my dad's truck pull up. I dove in, shaking. He looked pale as he scanned the ridge behind me, like he expected them to follow. I told him everything on the drive home. My voice trembled the whole time. I've run into wildlife, campers, even drunk kids in these hills, but never anything like that. 2 men who never said what they wanted. Who followed me for miles, always keeping just enough distance to make me think I could escape. I never saw them again. But every time I hike near the Appalachian foothills, I still feel it, the same prickling on the back of my neck. The same sensation of eyes watching from somewhere in the trees. The same soft echo of a whistle in the wind. I've always loved the Appalachian Mountains. The quiet trails, the whispering wind, the feeling of being alone with the world. It never felt dangerous. At least, not until that October evening. I was in bed, half watching something on my phone with the lights off. Outside, the small mountain town was silent, no passing cars, no late-night chatter, just the stillness of an autumn night. That's when I heard the sound. At first, it was soft, blending into the background, a metallic rattle from the side gate outside my bedroom window. I paused the video and listened harder. It came again, sharper this time. Someone was working the latch. I froze. My room was dim, the only glow coming from my phone screen. Every nerve in my body lit up at once. The sound wasn't the wind. It was careful, slow. I sat up, holding my breath. From my bed, I couldn't see the gate. It was just out of view, but I could hear every noise with terrifying clarity. The latch clicked once, then again. Then came the creak of wood under pressure. My pulse pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. I didn't dare turn on the light. I didn't want whoever was out there to know exactly where I was, so I sat in the dark, motionless. Then came the footsteps. Not hurried, not stumbling. Slow, controlled. They crunched on the gravel right outside my bedroom wall, one measured step at a time. Whoever it was knew how to move quietly. That was somehow worse than if they just charged up to the door. My sweaty fingers fumbled with my phone. I called my dad. He lives only a few minutes away. "Dad," I whispered. "Yeah?" His voice was groggy, half asleep. "Someone's outside the house." "What?" His tone sharpened instantly. I heard the fence, the gate, footsteps. "Call the cops," he said. "I'm coming." I hung up and crouched next to the bed, trying to make myself as small as possible. The footsteps moved along the wall, not toward the front door, just pacing. Like whoever was out there was in no rush. Like they wanted me to know they were there. Then everything went silent. No wind. No movement. The kind of silence that makes your skin prickle. I stared at the curtain, hardly blinking. Then a shadow slid across the window. A tall figure, inches away from where I sat. I could see the shape of their head and shoulders in the faint orange light spilling from a distant porch. No face, just an outline. A soft sound followed fingertips dragging slowly across the siding of the house. It wasn't random. It was a message. "I know you're in there." Headlights washed across the front yard. My dad's truck. The footsteps vanished before he even reached the porch. When he banged on the door, I bolted to let him in. We searched the yard with flashlights. The side gate latch was half undone. In the gravel, fresh footprints trailed along the wall beneath my window. Long, narrow, evenly spaced. Not just wandering, moving with purpose. The police came not long after. They looked around, made notes, took a report. One of the officers suggested it was probably just a trespasser, maybe someone passing through from the nearby trails. But none of them saw how the prints moved. None of them heard that careful, patient pacing. The next morning, my mom showed me something she'd gotten on her phone. A neighborhood alert from a few blocks away. Someone's security camera had caught a man in their driveway at 9:40 p.m., the same time I'd been sitting in the dark listening to footsteps. The footage was grainy, but I didn't need it to be clear. I didn't tell anyone what I really thought. It would sound paranoid, but I started double-checking every lock before bed. I wedged a steel bar against the sliding door. I started sleeping with my phone under my pillow. For weeks, I couldn't relax after sunset without straining to hear that sound, the faint rattle of the latch, the crunch of gravel, the slow, steady steps outside the wall. And sometimes, even when nothing was there, I thought I heard it anyway. I haven't been back to that trail. I don't hike alone anymore. The Appalachian ridges that once felt peaceful now feel like they're hiding something. The part that still keeps me awake isn't the shadow at the window. It isn't the sound of gravel under their feet. It's how calm they were. They didn't panic. They didn't run. They just